We now move to private members' business. The motion read the provision of special education, and I call on Deputy Darren O'Rourke of Sinn Féin to move the motion.
I move the motion. I'm sharing time with colleagues. I note the Senior Minister is down to speak later on. I hope she is listening in and will attend. She's joining us now. I welcome that. I move the Sinn Féin motion. It's a motion that we are prompted in bringing forward this evening. Having listened to the heartbreaking stories of the parents of children with special educational needs who are currently denied a suitable school place, or who are hoping against hope and fighting day and night for a suitable school place for their child for September, it's something they shouldn't have to do. I'm very grateful to those parents who shared their stories with us, and I want to welcome a number of them to the visitors' gallery here this evening. And those stories are harrowing, Minister. Parents talk about being heartbroken and shattered as they, in many cases, receive rejection after rejection from schools. They talk, for example, about the incredible impact an appropriate preschool placement has made and how they fear their child will regress if they don't get a suitable place at primary school. They fear that because other parents have told them about their own child's experience. And the same is the case, perhaps worse, at secondary level. We know, despite the commitments from the previous Minister, 126 children with a special education recommendation were left without a school place last September. All too often in the scramble for school places, parents of children with special educational needs are told to readjust their expectations. They may be told to extend their scope and look further away. Is an hour and a half too far away for you? That is not right or proper. Our motion this evening specifically calls for places to be provided within a reasonable distance of people's homes. Parents may be told that their child is on a waiting list, or that they are being entered into a lottery to see who gets one of the all too few local places. No child, or indeed any school leader, should be put in that position. And for many, despite it being a last resort, home tuition is the only option. We know that the number of children with special educational needs who are accessing home tuition has almost doubled in recent years, going from 69 to 135 in the last year alone. And at the root of this, Minister, is a failure to plan, a failure to prepare, a failure to invest, and more than anything, a failure to deliver. A failure by successive governments to deliver for children with special educational needs. And it's not just Sinn Féin who have identified these failings, it's the Ombudsman for Children, the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child and others. The Ombudsman for Children says, and I quote, "There is still no comprehensive and coherent plan to ensure that every child with special educational needs has a school place locally in a timely manner." End quote. The Department's special forecasting model is flawed. Its approach to data collection and collation is flawed. There is no centralised application system. The basic building blocks for a well-managed system simply isn't there. We're in mid-February, and right across the state we have parents scrambling for places for September. At the same time, we have school leaders who want to provide extra places who are told they can't due to departmental bureaucracy. Computer says no. Elsewhere, we have school leaders who want to provide extra places, but they won't be ready in time for September because, for example, the school build was delayed and the department won't sanction modular accommodation in the meantime. There are many more examples, Minister. I have no doubt the Minister will come forward and outline the scale of investment in special education in recent years, and I acknowledge that. But the Minister must acknowledge the shamefully low base they were starting from due to years of underinvestment. And she must also acknowledge the number of children who have to travel too far for a school place, who are on reduced timetable due to lack of support, whose school place doesn't meet their needs, and critically, the number of children locked out of school completely. The Sinn Féin motion is quite specific, Minister. It calls on the Government to ensure every child currently without a suitable school place and all those due to start primary or secondary school in September 2025 have access to a suitable school place within a reasonable distance of their home. To achieve that, the provision of school places for children with special educational needs must be priority number one for you, Minister. It can be done with the right focus and a determination to address the barriers to delivery, and you will have my full support and the support of my party, and I'm sure others in opposition, in order to achieve that. But the time for broken promises is over. I commend the motion to the House, and I look forward to the debate.
Thank you. Deputy Shona Ní Raghallaigh.
I'm honoured to speak as Sinn Féin's newly appointed spokesperson for special education. As a former Múntóir, I have cried with parents, tears of anger and frustration when their child was denied an appropriate school place. Entire families are left feeling hopeless, as if there is no light at the end of the tunnel, that their child will be left behind, all because of a government that doesn't really seem to care. We need a system that prioritises our children's rights. And that gives every parent the peace of mind they deserve. It's utterly heartbreaking to hear their stories of the parents here today, the parents in my area in Kildare. Too many families face an uphill battle simply to secure an appropriate school place for their children. Families are left overwhelmed and distraught, not by lack of effort or love on their part, but by the failure of successive governments who have left our most vulnerable children behind. I recently spoke to a mammy from Newbridge who applied to over 30 schools for her child, and she was given no support. She only found the information she desperately needed off her own back through social media and peer groups, other parents. She then had to pay for a private assessment to access the necessary report. She was left to navigate this alone, and her only guidance from the SENO minister, she was simply told to apply everywhere. And she did. She applied everywhere, even as far as 80 kilometres from her home, in the hopes that her baby would get an appropriate school place somewhere. But another cruel twist. They were pushed to the bottom of the waiting list because they didn't come from that local area. And Minister, she isn't alone. This is a daily reality for far too many parents, and we met with 8 different families only hours ago who are here today who shared their own individual stories. So let us be clear, this system isn't working. No parent or child should have to endure the stress and uncertainty of not knowing if their child will have a school place. Ní mór don rialtas a chintiú go méid ruchtan ag gach páiste atá gan áit scoil a rúnach faoi láthair agus ag gach páiste atá dul ar scoil bhun scoile nó ar bhun scoile a bhean fór fithe cuaig ar áit scoil a rúnach le stick de achar réúnach ón
Deputy David Cullinane.
Ministers, I first of all want to welcome to the public gallery many of the parents from Waterford who have travelled and who are doing everything possible to ensure that their children will get the appropriate education that they deserve. The facts are that they shouldn't have to lobby, they shouldn't have to travel, and they shouldn't have to protest, because they have enough to do to look after their children. We met many of them and they talked about the strains that all of this is putting on their relationships. Some of them have left their jobs, it's upended their whole life, and the least the state could do is to ensure that appropriate places are there for their children come September, and yet for many of them that's not the case. We have up to 40 to 50 parents across Waterford City and County who at this point don't know whether their children will have a place. They tell me that they do everything by the book. They've linked in with the local SENO. They contacted school after school. In fact, one parent told me of 16 different schools where she got a refusal. And now, how heartbreaking is that for that family? And this is replicated across many families. There's no proper registry of how many children are actually in need. We know from last year in Waterford there's many children who were left behind. And I gave a commitment to each and every one of those parents, some of whom are not here as well, that I'm not going to leave any of those children behind. And Deputy Conor McGuinness and I will make sure that we will, of course, work with government, but also hold the government to account to ensure that each and every one of those children get the education that they deserve. But what really sickens me is that last week in this Dáil, the first act of this government wasn't to ensure that these children were looked after, wasn't to ensure that children with scoliosis actually get the treatments they deserve. Your first act last week was to bring in a bill for more ministers and allowances for ministers, following on from a grubby, dirty deal that you guys did with the Michael Lowry Group of Independents. That, to me, sets the tone for this government. Your first act should have been to say to those parents in the public gallery and all of those across this state, we are going to move heaven and earth to ensure that your children has the education and the appropriate education that they deserve. Not more ministers, not more allowances and jobs for the boys and the girls that we got from you guys last week. So I have to say to you, get your priorities right. Darren O'Rourke, who's our education spokesperson, met with the families as well, and we have given them a commitment. We are not going to leave one child behind.
Deputy Pearce Doherty.
And thanks, Tyler, for the opportunity, Cancorlia, for the opportunity to speak on this. And Ministers, I'm sure you're aware that if you're a parent with a child with additional needs, sometimes it can be exhausting. And it's not the child that exhausts you, it's the system. It's fighting against the system over and over again. And over the last number of weeks, and indeed in the last number of days, the number of people who are coming to us are huge now. I've heard from parents firsthand that exhaustion, that beating down of the system, because their children doesn't have a place to go in September, or indeed at this point in time. In Donegal, we now have a full-blown crisis. We have a situation where, Minister, I'm sure you'll be aware, and I invite you up to Donegal to look at this. In particular, we have a school there which is Little Angel School. It is the only school in the county dedicated to students with severe and profound learning disabilities. It's a fantastic school. It recently had a brand new state-of-the-art building constructed, and it should be a moment of celebration for everybody. But it's too small. There are a countless number of families who have sat across from me, some of them in tears, that can't get a place for their child, that can't get a place for their son or daughter, despite all of the reports, and I have some of them for you, all of the reports telling them they need to be in Little Angels. And it's not fair on the staff, it's not fair on the principal, it's not fair on the board of management, the school is too small. Yet these children are not newborns. The state should know that these children have additional needs and that they need to be supported in a classroom. I have another family who's originally from Donegal. They live in Dublin now. The file is so thick. They have been applying for the last 3 years to every single school, and they've been refused. They've been number 1 on the list, number 6 on the list, number 8 on the list. That child is now transitioning into secondary school, and that child has nowhere to go. Nowhere to go, despite being in having additional needs. The school, the primary school that she attends, them telling her that it's not suitable for their needs. She went through her whole primary system, knowing that she was in the wrong school, but transitioning to secondary school, nowhere to go. They have letter after letter after letter refusing. And this is about cherishing the children of the nation equally. Well, there's a very clear sign, because this isn't the first time we've had a debate in this year. If you have a children with additional needs, this government is not looking after your needs. So I'm asking you to take the action that you have to make sure that all stops are pulled out to accommodate these children.
And I want to start by sharing the experience of a constituent of mine who has travelled from Waterford today alongside other mums and dads to be in the public gallery as we debate this motion. Her name is Rebecca, and she's the mother of Jay, one of 20 children in West Waterford that has been left without a special school space. And I've raised this previously with the Minister of State and twice in the Chamber in recent weeks. So rather than simply repeating my call for urgent action to add capacity in this area, I want to give voice to the frustration, worry, resilience and determination of these 20 families through Rebecca's words. So Rebecca said to me, Jay is a 5-year-old pre-verbal autistic child. He requires access to his primary school education for September 2025 in a special school setting. In terms of school spaces, it seems Jay is just a number, but to us he is everything. He represents all that is good about the world and has a lot to teach those who are willing to take the time to get to know him. Education is a constitutional right, and as his voice, I am determined to be the person to fight for that for him, because that is my job as a mother. Just as it is the government's responsibility to protect the vulnerable and to ensure this situation we find ourselves in is remediated with absolute urgency. Rebecca continues, there are 19 other families in the same situation in the town of Dungarvan, where there is only one school that can provide an appropriate education for our children. This school is at capacity and has been at capacity for the last few years. Our family have and continue to do everything to ensure our little boy thrives in every aspect of his life. We have created a world around our son that facilitates development, decreases vulnerability and ensures he will become as independent as possible for his future. But there seems to be zero expectations for our children, and it's simply not good enough. We are not asking for special treatment. We are just asking that our children are treated the same as every other child in the country, entitled to the highest standard of education to suit their needs. I refuse to accept that my child will not walk through the gates of the special school in Dungarvan in September 2025. It is his right. As a parent of a child with additional needs, I answer to only one person, and he's 5 years old with big blue eyes and no voice, but by God, he will be heard. So, Minister, I ask you to not only to add the capacity for September, but to meet these parents. I've asked you before, and to meet these parents and hear their stories.
Every child has the right to an education, and every child has the right to an appropriate education. Year on year, we can set our watches by parents coming on to local radio stations. They're on the phones, they're on the emails. Their child with additional needs can find a school place. Only now it's principals too that are on the local radio stations. It's producers on them shows that are ringing local TDs. They are so profoundly affected by the parents who are applying to 20, 22, 23, 25 schools and getting 25 rejections letters. Now, everybody knows if you have a child with additional needs, at days it feels like you are pushing a rock up a mountain, and that is exactly the situation that our current education system is creating for these families. There is one word that comes to mind when I see the trauma, when I hear the fear, and I hear the upset in parents' voices, and it's cruelty, because that's what this is, because it is entirely preventable. The department are well aware of where these children are. The department are well aware of what their additional needs are, but the department and successive governments have failed and failed again to plan. And I want to be very clear when I say this. This is not the responsibility of schools. This is not the responsibility of school leaders, and it sure isn't the responsibility of parents. The responsibility lies squarely on successive governments, and you need to fix this, and you need to fix this urgently, because each and every one of those children is entitled to the best possible education and to reach the best possible educational outcomes.
Deputy Attorney Claire Curran, please.
I too want to rise in support of this motion. It has become an annual issue, and it started already for September, where we hear from parents. There was a particular issue last year in South Roscommon, in my own constituency. 18 children, 18 sets of parents run ragged, trying to ring around schools and ask for a place, ask for an education for their child that meets their needs. It is a horrible situation, an extremely stressful situation to put parents in, and it infects their entire families. A child with additional needs, no matter what those needs are, should be able to access an education in a local school. They shouldn't be put in a position where they have to travel long distances or where they have to be split up from their brothers and sisters that are attending the local school. We also hear annually from school principals. I had a school in my constituency last year who were requested by the NCSE to open a special class. They were very happy to do so. They had 24 children seeking a place in a rural school. They applied to the department in plenty of time for additional accommodation to make this happen and to make sure that they could meet the needs of those children in their community. And they were told by the Department of Education to use their GP room. Now, for young people and for children, it's hard enough to start off at school, and it was for any of us. But, you know, shoving children into the GP room and setting up a class, I mean, can you imagine how different that makes a young person or a child feel going into the school, that you can just use the GP room and we'll set you up kind of a makeshift classroom? Hard enough to go in, hard enough to have those additional needs when you're that young and that age, then to be made feel by the department that you're different. I just think that's an appalling way to treat any child. It's not appropriate, it's not acceptable, and it's not the way that the department should act. I think the Department of Education encourage schools and want schools to open special classes, and we'll remember before they were naming schools that weren't doing so. But if the school isn't supported to actually open the class in the first place, then that's not working either. It is not within or outside the remit of the department to plan and to forecast to meet these children's needs. We had a bill before in terms of seeking that the NCSE and that the department would work together to forecast and to plan for these children. It is not impossible. And when you actually take a step back and you look at this, we're in a situation in one of the richest countries in the world in 2025 where parents are put in a position where they have to ring around schools and they have to lobby TDs and government to find a class place for their child to get them an education. And in some cases, they are put under huge pressure to do that. It's not normal, it shouldn't happen, and it's an issue that we should be more than able to overcome, and it's something that needs to be a priority now. Thank you.
And talk to Maria Devine at the hall.
In Crumlin in Dublin South Central, the Dublin 12 Autism Group, Grassroots of exhausted mummies have, through hard slog, tenacity and dogged determination, shown up the abject failures of those tasked, Minister, with providing an education for children with extra needs. Education is the only right guaranteed by this state. Unfortunately, a lack of understanding, a lack of cohesive policy in the face of an obvious need has resulted in the underinvestment and a paucity of services and supports, which leaves so many children way behind, abandoned. I've worked with the Dublin 12 Autism Group. Their vision, their hopes, their dreams for their children's future spurred them on to become warriors to achieve the opening of Scoil Owen in Crumlin, which is bursting at the seams. It has become a safe place to learn, grow and belong. Why hasn't a governmental comprehensive research plan been enacted? You've left it up to the mammies to lead. While the building and facilities are not ideal, sometimes better than in other places, for example, the occupational therapy is held in the hallways. It's giving children and parents a haven, a base nearer home, so they belong in their communities, they know their community and can be nurtured as future leaders of their community. It is their right. Minister, why hasn't this been replicated throughout the country for all our children's rights? Where are the additional need, essential autism classes, the special school places? When will the teachers be trained in the college degrees? They should do work experience in autism classes in special schools. A brief workshop is not sufficient. A shortage of teachers has a massive detrimental effect here in Dublin and impacts particularly resource teachers. Transport buses are unreliable, frequently cancelling services and leaving children unable to attend school if the school is located out from the family's home area. This disruption affects the entire family. Mainstream autistic children need support as well. Each mainstream class should have a full-time SNA. Children are left with unsatisfactory homeschooling or drastically reduced hours. We must invest in them and our staff.
I'll talk to Lewis O'Reilly at the hall.
And I want to thank my colleague Darren O'Rourke for bringing this motion forward this evening. Minister, I represent one of the youngest constituencies in this state. There is an urgent and a desperate need for more spaces for kids with additional needs in Fingal West. Minister, I want to talk to you about Caelan. Caelan is a bright, lovely 5-year-old boy. His mum is Jodie and he lives in Balbriggan. Caelan was diagnosed with ASD and GDD, along with other delays that are deemed severe in 2022. Caelan is currently non-verbal, but he is as mischievous as anything. He is a very lovely child. In preparation for, Caelan currently attends an ASD preschool and it's his last year there. So in preparation for that, his mum has applied for 14 schools with autism classes and 2 special schools. She says he has gotten 12 refusals from schools so far and also refused from the 2 special schools, as the report I have for Caelan don't specifically say that they recommend a special school. To get this report, I would have to get a new cognitive assessment, which will cost anywhere from €800. In September 24, I had to pay for an up-to-date educational report, which cost €200. Money that people don't have for a very, very, very basic entitlement that you should be providing for their children. Out of 8 primary schools in Balbriggan, Minister, only 4 have autism classes. Jodie, Caelan's mum, says, "My son and all children like my son deserve better than this. They have a right to an education. All of the hard work and effort Caelan has done in his ASD preschool will be undone should he be at home for months or up to a year again. It is apparently compulsory for a child that is 6 years of age to go to school. If my child," she says, "was neurotypical and I wasn't sending him to school, social services would be at my door, and rightly so. However, because my child is neurodivergent, has different educational needs, I, as a parent, must scrabble along with other parents to get one place that's on offer." Jodie says, "My child has been let down in every sense of the word by this state. He was let down in receiving developmental checks that were constantly cancelled. He was let down receiving the services and therapies I was told are crucial to his development." And Minister, it is in your hands now to say whether or not Caelan will be let down once again.
First
of all, I want to commend Deputy O'Rourke for bringing forward this motion this evening. I, like every other deputy in this House, have been inundated with people, with families coming forward who have a terrible situation where they have children that need special classes, that need to get accommodation and can't get it anywhere. Across the whole west of Ireland, Leitrim, Sligo, Donegal, everywhere I go, I come across children who are coming from one end of the country to the other. There's children coming from Cavan to Leitrim. There's children going from Leitrim to Sligo. They're travelling 70, 80 kilometres to get an appropriate school place. This criss-crossing across the country is something that drives people mad because they cannot get anywhere near them. Now, Minister, you mentioned in your opening comments that you know and have experience of these families, and I'm sure you have, and I don't doubt your sincerity, but I have to doubt your commitment. You and your colleagues have been 14 years in government. 14 years. Most of these children were not born, and you've been in government that long, and yet we are in this diabolical situation. You have to step up to the mark here and ensure that these places are provided. At the end of the day, the families out there who have a child with special needs, who needs special education, they have a huge burden to carry. We all know and understand that. And the last thing they need is to have to fight for everything. And yet that's their experience. Their experience of this state is this is a state where you have to fight every day of your life. You get up in the morning, you have to fight to get an assessment for a need, for to find out what's wrong with the child, to get an appropriate accommodation, whether it's in school, whether it's in the HSE, whatever. Everything they do is a battle. Battle after battle after battle. Is that the kind of state that we should be proud of? I don't think so, Minister. After 14 years in government, that is the kind of state that you and your government has created. I think you need to cop on here and recognise that we cannot go on the way we have gone on. We have to recognise that these children, it is a reflection of the whole society that we live in. If we cannot look after the weakest, the most vulnerable in our society, then who can we look after? So, Minister, I appreciate that you said, and words are cheap, because words are very cheap in this place, that you said that you're going to do something about this, that you're committed to it. Well, we bloody well need to see it, because those families out there cannot go on like this for any longer. The children in this state deserve to get fair play, and that's all they're asking for. Not that they have to get up every morning and battle and fight for what they're entitled to.
Appropriate school places, particularly for those children with special needs, has to be a priority, Minister. I have to agree with you on that, but the fact is we are now dealing with what has been an absolute abject failure for children and failure for families. Look, it's been stated by many people already, and look, we've all been contacted over many years about absolutely frustrated parents who cannot get their kids into school places. And we also have I've dealt with many who've spoken about their kids and the criteria, and when you talk about whether it's mainstream, whether it's autism units, or whether we're talking about special schools, that their ID may be too high, maybe too low, and that they're not even sure that they're actually going to fit criteria anywhere. We're dealing with absolutely multiple failures, multiple issues. As regards the school places, I think the Minister, I absolutely welcome the fact you talk about this departmental and NCS engagement with schools and make sure that we ensure that there are spaces. But I've spoken to many principals who've spoken about their engagement in relation to the department, in relation to the school building unit, and they talk about the huge issues. They talk about providing the information doesn't come back in time, the issues in relation to planning, and rarely the issue actually occurs at a local authority point, but the management of this that used to be within the gift of the schools isn't always. So at times this pushes it back, and we all at times celebrate tiny victories when 2 or 3 kids, or possibly 4 or 5, or sometimes it's only 1, get into a particular school, and you at least know that a family and a parent and a child is going to be sorted. But your issue is many, many more are absolutely failed over a huge period of time. And look, the common application system, that makes sense. It needs to be operated. I introduced legislation last term, and I'll be reintroducing it, the Educational Amendment Bill, and that is the idea that parents with kids with disabilities would be able to apply 2 years ahead, so that school and everyone else could get all their ducks in a row, and we could ensure that the supports were there. And we really have to stop talking about the fact with the school inclusion model of we are expanding it. We need to make sure it is rolled out across the board, because the failure in relation to assessments, the failure in relation to therapies can only be sorted by putting the resource where the need is, and that is the therapists, the assessments that happen in school.
The Sinn Féin Deputy Sean Crowe.
I wish listen to the Minister, and I wish you both well in relation to your job. You also mentioned the fact that there's parents in the gallery here tonight, and I'm conscious that there's people here from Tala and Dublin South West and are probably watching from home. But I'm also conscious there would be a lot more parents here, but the fact is that they can't get out because of lack of childcare facilities or someone to look after their child with special needs. The area represents is an area that has seen tremendous growth in the last 20 years. But many of the services, especially in disability and special education for young people, have not kept up. It's gone very, very slowly. It's not kept up. And you talk to families, and it's vulnerable children and their parents that are being left behind. It was mentioned earlier about a school in our constituency that does life-changing work for children with complex needs. But the accommodation is not fit for purpose. It's not fit for the 21st century. I was deeply disturbed when I went there and seeing the conditions that teachers are working in and children were there. And one of the challenges they were saying, there was challenges all over the place in relation, and I'm sure the minister is aware of it, and there's been correspondence going back and forward from the school itself. But they were saying that, some of the things that need to be done, that every time it was some was major works, but it's in every area, and they have to get a consultant's report. And they were saying this could come up, take up to 2,000 grand in relation to it. So maybe that's something you could look at in relation to, We're aware of the summer works and all the other things, but there's so much things that need to be done there that's clearly something that needs to be looked at in relation to the schools. Most schools don't have it. Like, I looked at a school, and there was the toilets, they weren't wide enough for, like some of the children are really big. And this is not just this school, I've gone to other schools as well. There's stuff like children soil themselves, and there's nowhere to wash them kids. So there's all those basic things in relation to that we need to do. Families are struggling in relation to it. Sorry, I've gone over the time. Minister, welcome the fact you've said you were going to work with us, and we'll work with you.
Thank you.
Every child has a fundamental right to education, a right that all children should equally enjoy. But we must face reality that in the year 2025 in Ireland, this is simply not the case. That some of the most vulnerable children in Irish society are being left behind, left waiting years for an assessment, and then left battling to find a school that they can provide the correct resources for their child. This simply should not be acceptable, but it has become the norm right across the state. This government needs to face the fact that under the watch of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, children with additional needs are being left behind, and their parents are pushed to breaking point. Early intervention is crucial for a child to reach their full potential and to prepare them for life. Early intervention can dramatically improve the outcome for children with additional needs, from socially, academically to emotionally. This crisis has not just appeared out of nowhere. It is a clear consequence of decades of underinvestment and poor planning by successive governments. Year after year, demand for special education has grown, yet we are left deeply disjointed, with a disjointed system with poor coordination between the Department of Education, the NCSE and schools. No family should be left facing the beginning of school term without a guaranteed place that can provide the correct support for their child. Parents of children with additional needs in Carlow are sadly facing just this. There is an utter lack of space in ASD units in schools right across Carlow. Or where a parent does find a place, they are being told they cannot be offered the place as they're not in the school catchment area. In Kilkenny, we have families that are dropping some of their children to the local school, then driving as far away as Waterford to drop their child with additional needs to a school with an ASD place. A child's education should be provided for in their community first and foremost, and not forced to travel so far to simply attend a school with an appropriate facility. It is pulling the social fabric of communities apart. We need to face special education with drive and ambition, because with anything less, families will continue to struggle. Children across the state will be left behind, Minister.
Thank you.
Ministers, I've been contacted by several parents who are left in a void, having to fight for places in schools for their children with complex needs. Dawn Bennett, one such parent who relocated her family from Limerick to Kilrush in County Clare in order to find a suitable place in a primary school for her son Jamie, who has complex needs. Now Dawn faces the same fight to try and find a place in a secondary school for Jamie. The nearest school that would have places to suit Jamie is in Ennis, almost 43 kilometres away. Fiona, Gaffney and Shannon also had the same issue with her daughter and could only find a place in Limerick, just over 25 kilometres away. Her daughter with complex needs had to not only navigate a new school with new people, new teachers, but she also had to leave her friends, and this has caused a lot of stress and anxiety for Fiona, her daughter and family. Catherine in West Clare has said that the lack of services and resources is so worrying. There is all this talk of human rights and advocacy, but they can't even get the basic rights, like education for all and safety. This parent is also in a fight to get a place for her son in a secondary school. Catherine's son has Down syndrome and complex needs, and this is simply not fair. Roisin, who has been diagnosed with autism and does not have a place in her school in the autism unit, has been made to feel and has been told she's not autistic enough. Roisin has an allocated short amount of time with a teacher. Roisin will become an official adult in November, meaning that the Children's Disability Network will discharge her, and this means Roisin will be left with a gap in services, facing into her final year and leaving cert with no service to help her through. This fragmented type of service is causing anxiety all over. In the words of Dawn in West Clare, it's only when you're in the system of having a child with disability that you quickly learn that you are their voice and that everything is a fight, and it shouldn't be this way for these children. The government needs to stop being reactive in this case and start being proactive to help these families and to end this constant battle to find suitable places in school for their children. I hope that in 2025 we see suitable places within a reasonable distance from children's homes. We must also ensure the schools have adequate funding to build or repurpose existing accommodation to meet their needs.
Deputy Darren O'Rourke.
And I want to thank everyone who's contributed to this debate. I met earlier on with people from Waterford, with David Cullinan and Conor D. McGuinness, and from Laois with Senator Maria McCormick, and a number of people have contacted us as well through different forums. And what I hear from parents, Minister, and they want you to hear it, is that they feel, and they're right, their children are being left behind. And what they're saying to me and to my colleagues is that as parents, exhausted, they're heartbroken, they're frustrated, but they are resolute and determined, for the love of their own children, to see this through. And you need to hear that, Minister, and I'm sure you're well aware of it, but I want to make sure that you are. This situation is totally avoidable. Totally avoidable had we planned, resourced, invested for long enough. And it was made the point, and it is a valid point, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, in some shape or form, have been in government for a long, long time, before all of these children were born. I cannot support the government amendment. I'm disappointed, Minister, that you brought an amendment in the first place, but in the first instance, the reason I won't be supporting it is because where the Sinn Féin motion has specific language in terms of a commitment for September 2025, you have a commitment to deliver in a timely manner, and that's not strong enough for me, Minister, and won't be supporting the motion. That being said, the commitment that is there from government, from the two ministers here, from this side of the House, certainly from Sinn Féin's perspective, and I think across the opposition benches, if the objective is to deliver appropriate school places for every child for September, we will work with you every step of the way. The barriers that have been identified, and we can talk for a long time about the different barriers, but you will find a willing partner on this side of the House, ministers, to deliver on that objective. And we will persevere and we will persist on this side in relation to it, because these children deserve nothing less.
Thank you, Deputy. And that concludes the debate. And the question is that the amendment be made. Deputies in favour of the question say Tá. Deputies against the question say Níl. In my opinion, the question is carried. Vote all. And that will be, the division is deferred until the weekly division time tomorrow evening. Thank you, Deputies. We now move to topical questions.